Hello, everyone. Happy Tuesday. Hope all of you are doing well and enjoying your day so far, whether this is first period or eighth period. Make sure you get the Chapter 11, Section 1 key terms to me by 3 p.m. today. All right, that's when they are due. Your homework for tonight is to complete Chapter 11, Section 1 worksheet. You can get started on that. That is not due until Friday. Same thing with last weekend. Maybe some of you are noticing a trend. You basically have 2 homework assignments for history at least every week. You have the key terms and the worksheet, okay? And key terms are due on Tuesdays by 3 p.m. Worksheets are due by Friday at 3 p.m. All right? We are going to cover 2 slides in Section 1. We'll finish Section 1 on Thursday when we conference. And if you can take out your notes, we are going to pick up where we left off yesterday. So yesterday we were talking about the inventions of agriculture. Today we are going to start off talking about knighthood. And knights never really have left society. Today they live in video games, movies, TV shows, cartoons, right? But during the high and late Middle Ages, knights were the men that would fight for nobles in battles, wars, and so forth. And Western Europe during the high and late Middle Ages will become a battleground of warring nobles constantly competing for power. Okay, and with nobles competing for power, you have kings competing for power, and that's how kingdoms are formed. That's how their boundaries have changed over the course of history. And these nobles and kings raised private armies of knights. They would offer knights land in return for their services. And to be a knight during the high and late Middle Ages is like being a professional athlete today, or being a professional singer, or professional actor. What like Mark Wahlberg is in acting. Knights were during the high and late Middle Ages. What LeBron James and Michael Jordan are to basketball. All right, knights were to people of the Middle Ages. People looked up to knights. They admired their bravery. And a lot of these knights had a passion for fighting. They had a passion for competing. Right? They did not just fight in wars. They also competed in tournaments. There's a lot of different tournaments that they would compete in to show their skills. Right? To earn basically a noble's protection or right to live on their territory. And if you've ever, any of you, I don't know if any of you have ever been to medieval times in New Jersey. All right, but in medieval times they reenact some of the tournaments that the knights would actually compete in all over Western Europe during the high and late Middle Ages, and that's really when knighthood began. It began around the year 1000, which is the start of the high and late Middle Ages. But there was a process to become a knight. You couldn't just become a knight, because your father was a knight. You had to earn it. It wasn't just given to you. Just like, Michael Jordan didn't become a great basketball player because, his dad was a good athlete. No, he earned it, right? You know, Same goes with any athlete. Knighthood had to be earned. It wasn't just given to him. And lords would give these knights land in return for their military service. All knights would begin out as a page. A page was a boy around the age of 7, 8, 9, 10 years old, anywhere around then. And they would basically work for a knight. They would leave their family, work for a knight, take care of the horse, take care of the stable, do whatever, sharpen the knight's sword, take care of his armor, clean his armor, so forth. Then he would graduate to be a squire, and a squire would go with a knight into battle, would go with a knight into tournaments, and they would be a little bit more involved in the knight's responsibility. And then from a squire, if a squire could prove himself out on a battlefield or prove himself in a tournament, then another knight or lord could make a squire become a knight through the ceremony of homage. Okay, and at that ceremony, a squire would have to basically promise to follow a code, and that code was the code of chivalry. Right, and chivalry was basically a guide of behavior for good manners. It's kind of like the guide of behavior that your parents have instilled in you guys since you were very young. And this code is here below. A knight must obey his lord, show bravery, respect women of noble birth. Doesn't mean don't respect peasant women, but they are expected to show respect and acknowledge women of noble birth. Protect the church, honor the church, and to help people. Okay, if they're in danger, if there's invasions, which was very common during the high and late Middle Ages, they are expected to help those people and protect them. All right, so that's what you need to know about the Code of Chivalry. One very popular event or tournament that knights would compete in is jousting, and they've reenacted this at medieval times. If you've ever been there, unfortunately, you can't really go anytime soon with the quarantine in place. But the jousting tournament was when armored knights would be on horseback, and they basically have this large lance, large pole-looking feature, and that would be extended out in front of them, and they would gallop towards each other with the purpose to try and knock their opponent off of the horse onto the ground. Right, and that was the game called jousting. There's even, I think on TV there was a show a few years ago where men would dress up in knight's armor and they would actually ride on horseback at each other with lances that they actually would have used during the Middle Ages, and they'd try to knock each other off a horse. Right? So that's the other, that's another reenactment of knighthood. So this is a very popular image we have of the high and late Middle Ages, and we wouldn't have the video games out there with knights in them. I'm sure you guys know some of the video games I'm talking about. I don't play video games, I don't know. Maybe Mr. Brennan would know. But movies, television and series and stuff. I'm not sure if you guys heard of TV series, but there's a lot of TV series out there that have been inspired by knighthood, such as Game of Thrones. It's a little old for you guys, but maybe your parents watched Game of Thrones. That was like a show inspired by knighthood, and some of the things in that show, kind of relate back to this time period. All right, so we wouldn't have a show like that or movies like that, movies like King Arthur out there if it wasn't for this aspect of the Middle Ages. All right, so hopefully you copied all of this down. I spent a lot of time in this slide. If you have any questions on knighthood, we can talk a little bit more about that Thursday. Moving on to the next slide. So a knight would be considered a noble, right? And they oftentimes served a more powerful noble or an overlord, a more powerful lord. And these nobles, whether you're a knight, a vassal, or a king or more powerful lord, they lived in large stone houses called castles. And these castles were built in a specific way so that they could withstand attacks during times of war. They were literally constructed as a fortification. They were constructed to protect everyone within a town would be able to seek refuge within a castle. So there was a large open area inside. The main part of the castle, where usually the noble's family lived, was called the keep. All right, that was the tallest tower with very thick walls. And example of what the keep would be is this part of the castle there. And within the keep there was a great hall. All right, there's many rooms that they would have a guest room. The family they would each have their own room, and oftentimes in the basement, in the bottom part of the keep, would be the dungeon for any prisoners or criminals. Prisoners of war, criminals would be held in the bottom of the keep, which is kind of strange to think about, but that's where their prison cells were, and they referred to them as dungeons. Right? And the people of the household servants would also live in the keep as well. And all of these castles were surrounded by moats for protection. Usually it was a man-made waterway built around the castle, or sometimes they built fortifications as well. There were no crocodiles in these moats. I usually get that question all the time when I'm teaching this in class. But there are no crocodiles. There's no sharks. There's no, booby traps that enemies would have to withstand. There was just simply a moat, because that way a person could not just put a ladder up against the wall and climb on it. They had to figure out how to get across the water, how to get across the bridge in order to invade the castle. All right, and castles were always built on the high ground, so that way they had the advantage if they were to be attacked. Some important terms you need to know from this slide. All right, make sure you know what a keep is. All right, know that that is the tallest tower of a castle, and that's where the noble's family would reside. No castles are basically large stone houses built to withstand attacks. Right, and as I said, we're only covering 2 slides today, so this is the last slide for class, so make sure you get all these notes down. If you miss anything, you can always go back and watch the video. Use the notes from yesterday, actually going back to Friday last week. On Monday and Tuesday to get started on that Section 3 worksheet, and make sure you get that to me by Friday. You can always use the iBook to complete the rest of the worksheet. If you don't want to use your iBook, you can always wait till we finish the notes on Thursday for Section 1, and then get me the worksheet by Friday. All right? So if you have any questions on any of these 2 slides, you can ask them during the conference on Thursday. Thank you, and I hope all of you have a great day. Take care.